Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Morung Express and the Department of Information and Public Relations, Government of Nagaland, I warmly welcome you to today's very important panel discussion. I see a lot of young people and students today, and that's really encouraging. We're especially honored to have three accomplished panelists with us today, practitioners whose expertise, insights, and experience will guide us in our discussion today. Let us also take this time to appreciate and support the Morung Express for hosting this timely dialogue and for their vision of creating a culture of dialogue and reflection in Nagaland, and also for their commitment to social responsibility and critical thinking. This morning, I invite all of us to use this time very meaningfully, and for that, I request you to kindly keep your mobile phones on silent mode and refrain from unnecessary movements so that we can listen actively with our open minds as we explore this morning what it is to tell the truth and also what it is to seek the truth. To frame the context of our discussion on the theme Media Ethics and Responsibility in a Changing Landscape, let me begin with some opening remarks. We all understand that this evolving media environment, from traditional print to the explosion of digital and social platforms, is a global phenomenon, as we witness a radical shift in how people consume information, how this is shaping public opinion, governance, and social harmony in ways that we could not have imagined a generation ago. This has also made the role of ethics in media more critical than ever. As indigenous people, all of us, rooted in our oral traditions, trusting what we are told by the custodians of information in our society has been our way of living, because as a people, that is how we survived. But now this changing landscape of digital age and digital media, we find ourselves in a very precarious zone. Our oral traditions that we have received for generations of our preserved knowledge, history, and values, it's been going on for generations. And as a culture, we have a trust reflex to, trust the stories that has been narrated by our elders or people who are responsible in the community. Yet it is precisely this strength that makes societies vulnerable when fake news arrives with a facade of authenticity. This information cloaked in familiar tones of authority and then the appearance of credibility. So in doing so, it slips past our filters of trust, making it harder for us to tell what is fact and what is fabrication. Adding to this, we all now live in an algorithm-curated space where, we are fed with only what we want to hear and what we want to see. And this is creating something called the echo chambers that fuels deeper polarization and sharper divisions. I also want to say that our exposure as a society in Nagaland to mass media has been far shorter than elsewhere. For decades, our villages, and small towns in Nagaland, we have only relied on entirely on radio. I say this because later on came TV and print media, but this largely catered to the English-speaking demographic and urban elite. Even today, many villages and small towns have no access to newspapers. And vernacular print is still nascent because, majority of the population have not had access to reading print news in their own languages. Though I agree there are some, like Mogokchung or Kohima, they may have had vernacular print for many decades. So critical reading and analysis remains limited in our society. But today, while most households in our villages may not own a television, almost every person now owns a mobile phone, even in the remotest corner of our state. And they can access social media, at the very least YouTube. This is liberating. For the first time, everyone has an equal footing to access information and news. But it's also fraught with danger. The risk is that along with genuine information, misinformation and propaganda now travels just as quickly, blurring the line between truth and falsehood. Research also shows that societies and regions with a long reading culture are often more resilient to misinformation. So for example, states like Kerala, with over a century of vernacular newspaper, have nurtured habits of questioning and debate. Countries like Finland has media literacy in schools from a very early age, helping citizens identify bias and disinformation. By contrast, in Nagaland, our journey has been different. We have sort of leapt directly from radio to YouTube and WhatsApp University. So for most, and including the youth, we have skipped these intermediate stages that could have helped develop critical news consumption skills and media literacy as a community, and our muscle memory of reading critically for generations is quite weak. So this missing intermediate stages makes our entry into the digital media abrupt. It means our filters of discernment for truth is weak and is different, and our vulnerabilities are again different too. So it is here in this very fragile space that we must ask, what is it? What does it mean to tell the truth? And what does it mean to seek the truth actively? So the challenge before us here today is not only how information is presented, who reports it, how is it reported, but as a society, we must begin to learn to consume, question, and trust news responsibly, and how we should demand for truth and integrity. Trust has always been the core and the heart of oral culture, and it is also the foundation of journalism. With trust, both storytelling and journalism, without trust, right, both journalism and storytelling lose their purpose. This is why a space like this today, dialogue like this matters. As citizens, our responsibility is to question, to ask whether we're passing on the truth, to question who's behind it, or whether it may cause harm. And for practitioners, obviously, the responsibility is to integrity and accuracy over sensationalism and speed. A single unethical report can fuel ethnic tension, mistrust in government, governance, or social disharmony. So responsibility then, we understand, is not optional. It may well determine our survival as a resilient society built on trust and to be responsible for better governance. As questioning literate citizenry holds, our leaders accountable, and we can resist. By doing so, we can resist erasure by the dominant culture. So today, as our panelists share their reflections, I invite all of us to consider, how do we balance speed with accuracy? Do we maintain independence? How do we maintain independence under pressure, whether political, commercial, or digital? And how do we, both as journalists and citizens, ensure that truth is not a casualty in the changing media landscape? With these thoughts, I would like to invite our amazing panelists with their presentations for today. And the format will be like this. Each panelist will speak for 15 minutes, around 15 minutes, maybe 20, I don't know, depends on Akang. I am asked to be the strict class monitor, so I will be giving you a warning if you're taking too much time. Afterwards, I will open the floor for questions and comments for the audience. So I would request and encourage all of you to take note and think about questions that may add value to this dialogue. So with that, may I invite the panelists. First is Esther Verma. Miss Esther Verma, she is the Chief Operating Officer of Nagaland News Network. Our second panelist is Lungleng. Everybody knows him, I guess. He's the host of the Lungleng Show. And last but not the least, Dr Moalemba Jamir. He's the Associate Editor of the Morung Express. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, panelists, for your time. So now the first panelist I would like to invite to the podium is Esther Verma. Please take your time. Thank you.
It is just not for journalists. It's also for the common public, for the people. And in this digital age, the public also should share the same responsibility. It is just not for journalists or media professionals, but it is also the public that has to share the same responsibility. And how to identify fake news. All this should be, should media houses, civil society organization must collaborate. So like today, we're having this. There's a collaboration between the Morung Express and the DIPR, but then again, the collab is also with all you students over here and the guests over here. It is all a collaboration, and that is very important. Dialogues like this should happen more often, and discussions should happen more often. And also, I want to give a few examples, okay? Conclusion and call for action. This is what is needed in Nagaland right now. We don't have a regulating body as such, because the DIPR is a government body. But then for private media houses, do we actually have to be under the IPR, the Directorate of Information? Do we have to be, because we are private media houses, and then we will fall under the mercy of the government if we are under the IPR? I don't think so. I feel, being the fourth pillar, so that is the thing. That should be differentiated. I'll give a recent example. September 2nd and 4th was the assembly session, Nagaland Legislative Assembly session, and just one satellite channel was called, and the rest were not. But then again, there was a lot of hodgepodge, because some media house was called, whereas the criteria for this one is not allowed. There was a lot of confusion, and the IPR, they themselves, I'm very sure, was a little confused as well, but then they also have directives. So, but my point is, who is regulating this? I mean, where suddenly out of nowhere, where did this regulation come as well for media houses? So now if we have a YouTube channel, yes, but being called mere YouTubers also, is there a criteria to be called just a mere YouTuber news channel? Yes, there are very much a lot of news channels out there from Nagaland based, and one must know how to differentiate, first of all, which exactly is a proper news channel, and also what kind of information they are giving out and how they are giving it out is very important.
So it's always important to critically think and ask questions why certain thing happens at certain time. And I think when we start researching that, we will always get the wonderful answers, not just becoming a voice that complains, but a voice that analyzes. When I was in my university days, our director came and scolded all of us because we were so enthusiastic and we're having so much zeal to become social rights activists, and every student acted like as if they are an activist. And like we would stand up for LGBTQ rights, we'll stand up for everything under the sun that we perceived as injustice. So our director came and scolded us. You all have become more reactionary, more reactive rather than analytical. And that really struck me really hard. How analytical we are. So the purpose of becoming an analytical reporter or analytical personality is to dig deep and find the truth. So at the end of the day, I believe that media's role is to inform the public about the truth of something. And when we miss the truth, there's no point. I might get like 5 lakhs views in just 1 hour. It doesn't make sense. But as long as we are able to report the truth and make our audience understand the context of why certain thing is happening at certain time, then it will make sense and it will inform the public in a very fair, logical, and analytical manner. And that's how we educate the public to understand issue in a very, very holistic manner. If we don't do that, like the 2 journalists in China found the dead baby on the roadside, we'll just resort to our emotional outburst and we lose the substance from such reporting. And as I try to understand media and reporting more and more, I believe that context has become the pillar for us to understand the issue in a very, very appropriate or in the most fair manner at that given point of time. So, media or journalist should be a moral compass without a needle. What does it mean? Like we all should become the moral compass in our society as well, but without a needle. Without a needle, what I mean by that, without a needle, we don't have to be pressured by or any sort of clickbaits or any sort of propaganda and agenda. So be a moral compass, but don't have that needle, so that you would not go wherever you are pressured, because the needle will go wherever it is pressured, wherever it is directed to. And media should play a role as an interpreter and translator of human suffering. I believe in that. And I did not venture into media wanting to report events or wanting to do some discussion. But I believe that through discussion and dialogue, if only we can alleviate human suffering, that includes our local context, like the suffering that people are going through in Nagaland, for instance. The suffering that we as minority in religious term or in social term or even in political term, the suffering that comes along with being a minority is huge. So I started venturing into media. How can we alleviate those suffering? I think the purpose, the only solution is to educate people, educate each other, and when we learn something about the nature of the struggles that we're going through, then we will take action individually and also collectively. And that's how we resolve the issue together. That's what I strongly believed, and I'm still believing in that. And I hope we can make a media ethics and responsibility in a changing landscape a powerful thing to discuss, a powerful thing to pay attention to. Not just a cliche for the sake of discussion, but something that we all hold on to and live our life with that. And I believe that a lot of you are from media background also, and mass communication background, and some of you may not be also. But as responsible citizens, we have phone in our hand, internet in our hand. I strongly also believe in the idea of citizen journalism. And by that, you don't have to randomly pick up phone and report. Analyze it, see from the two sides of the story, and present it to the public. And let public be the judge of what's happening. So our duty is mostly to present the facts and the truth after analyzing.
The advent of technology has democratized how news are being presented or how contents are being given to the people. At the same time, this also raised a lot of ethical issues that the previous speaker has already stated before. So, without going into the background, I just want to frame the issue into maybe around 4 or 3 sets of questions. The first one is, who am I? Who am I? That is, media as we are we looking at oneself and demanding transparency, or are we transparent as we demand transparency from others? That is a first important question. This is very important because, as we all know, today there are each day new news outlet and digital outlet is coming up in Nagaland, and it is same everywhere. Now, if we look at how those channel or news outlet operates, it's more like they mainly operate on social media as well as on YouTube channels, right? And if we go and search about who are the people behind those, I think there is no clear website. No clear website will be there, or they don't have. We don't know who is behind the stories or outlets. And this is not restricted to just new digital media outlet. Even the established press media also suffers from this. If you look, many of you are students of mass communication, and you must have taken this in your classes. Is that, have you ever checked whether each newspaper in Nagaland has a clear philosophical objective or about us section, or a section where they inform about who who the editor is or who are the people behind the news that is being produced each day. So before demanding ethics and ethical concern from others, first the media has to practice it. So the one question that is in this context to be asked is that if media demands transparency, should it not first practice it? And as we all know, again, the digital media outlet that is coming up, we see that there is certain kind of visibility because reporters are reporting and they have to report on the face. This gives a sense of transparency. However, we don't know who are the real decision makers. I'm very glad that my co-panelists today, when their outlet was launched, they had sent out press releases to others, and they had a full official launching program also, right? But many are coming up just like that. Each day we are coming across a new channels, new TV channels, and so that is the first thing. Who am I? Who are we? The second question is, who are you? So following the first one, the second one is that who are you? That is how we practice our trade, how we practice our profession. Right? So this question presents.
When we look at the ethics and responsibilities, I'm sure these are words that you have heard commonly. About being impartial, about being just, about being independent, about being transparent, about being accountable. These are things that we hear in everyday life. And it's a reflection of how a society, a people should be and ought to be. But I think in the context of media, it's about professionalism. It's about being professional about it. And I think this is the challenge that we have. To me, I would say COVID was a turning point. The newspapers were not printing. They were still functioning and working. The PDF version was being circulated because information at that point of time was so important, critical for public awareness. And yet it was also the turning point of the media landscape within the Naga context. And out of that experience, rightly so, many news outlets emerge. And since then, there has been, if I may put it this way, a democratization of information and news. It has been democratized in the sense that now it's not just a few, but now it is many. But within that democratization of news and information, it has also led to a crisis of credibility. And the crisis of credibility stems from the question of ethics and responsibility. And I know that what we have shared this afternoon is only, we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more to say. There's so much more to talk about. When I think of, I'm not a journalist. I don't have a background in mass communication. My field is completely, different, but we share similar values in terms of responsibility, in terms of independence, in terms of fairness, and so on and so forth. So my background is very different. But I've been associated with a media organization, a media house. And when I think of ethics and responsibilities, the image that comes to my mind is a tango, a dance. It's a tango between freedom and responsibility, the tango between freedom and limitation. And tango is very intimate, and in tango you have to improvise, and a tango is basically something that started with the working people. And so when I think of media ethics and responsibility, I think of the tango dance. It needs balance, it needs improvisation, And you have to care for each other. One partner has to care for the other. So we have to care for freedom as well as limitations. How we are able to balance that, I think, happens twofold. One is the organizational professionalism. So every organization, every media house has its own sense of being professional about it. And then we have those in the field. We call it the media practitioners. You talk about the professional journalists. You talk about the online creators, content creators. There has to be some kind of ethics there as well. And sometimes, yes, there's a tension between, the professionalism of an organization and the professionalism of a practitioner, if I may say so. And it requires careful balance. And therefore, the broader aspect is so important. And then, of course, our friend from 24/7 talked about a body. For the newspapers, we are accountable to the Press Council of India. So if we do carry a news reportage or an article that violates the ethics and norms of the Press Council of India, you can take us, you can file a complaint, we will be called to answer. And they have the power to even recommend that our registration is removed from the Registrar of Newspapers of India. So as far as newspapers are concerned, there is a mechanism in place. Now, how that is exercised, I think, is a matter of perspective and a matter in which it is implemented as well. But news, again, is very contextual. We talk about freedom of speech. It is a universal value. But the application is so contextual. It is defined by the history, by the geography, and the politics of a region. What we say local news here is not really local for us. It is our national news in that sense, pertaining to within the geography in which we live, because that is most important. So sometimes these kind of terminologies matters. And so within our history and geography and our politics, what is news? Every bit of information is not necessarily news. And therefore it is the responsibility of a media house, a newspaper, or a channel, or a news outlet to really go through that process. We receive articles, and some here, friends from the Morung Express are here, and if there are articles that do not fulfill or do not meet the standards of the Press Council of India, it is not published. It's simple as that, in that sense. But of course, those decisions have to be made in a prudent and judicious way to see if it violates or if it contravenes. If the article is to incite violence, is to incite hatred, then of course it is violating as well ethical norms and principles, and so we do not publish it. So that comes with the inherent responsibility of being a media organization. I think one of the challenges when we talk about the crisis of credibility of news and media organizations in our context is, I think, we are struggling with the different personalities of media. On one hand, yes, media houses, media is also of, let's say it is business. There's a business side of it. At the same time, it has also the social public service. So when we talk about journalists, it's not just about professional journalism as well. It's also about being, and I think Lungleng has kept on repeating about the social aspect of it. So media houses in that sense are also pillars of public service. Of late, since we belong, or I belong, or I come from an organization that is focused on print media, I think one of the positive aspects of the online content creation, the digital outlets. I think one of the positive aspects is that it's taken out a lot of pressure from the print media. I think before digital media in that sense has flourished and has come in the way it has come, there was a lot of pressure on print media. Because print media was the only form of mass communication, at least in the Naga context. So sometimes they were almost being compelled to work and function like, a television, and it cannot. So one of the positive is that that same kind of pressure is not there in print media. That pressure has been taken away by digital content, news outlet, and so on and so forth. One of the negatives that we face now as a repercussion is this whole idea of paid news, or this whole idea of being paid to cover an event, because now people are also not able to differentiate. And when I say this, I say it in good spirit, because this is a learning curve for all of us, and that is why I think such dialogues and conversations are important. Conflicts of interest were raised in the course of the discussion. And conflict of interest is not just in terms of the individual, but it's also in terms of how discovered. How do you get the information? How do you get the news? And so one of the aspects that the print media, at least for us in the Morung Express, is people do also question us, or do we have to pay for this? And we say no. When you come to cover an event, do we have to pay you? We say no. This is part of our public service. And so I think, again, I go back to the tango as an illustration. Whether it's the print media or whether it is the digital media in that sense, I think we are all dealing with how to balance, how to be more responsible. And definitely there has to be a dialogue between the print and the digital. A friend here asked about, the format is changing. Yes, the format is definitely changing. And I know that after COVID, circulations of newspapers have decreased. I cannot speak for others, but I know Morung Express, our circulation has decreased. But it comes with, the changing. And so we in Morung Express, we also keep discussing we need to reinvent ourselves. We can't be static about it. The format may still remain the same as in print, but now the way we approach it, the way that we present it, there has to be a shift. Journalists that were used to working, reporting, going around, moving around, and then collecting stories and coming back and filing stories in the evening, now with this, they have to change the way they even function. So, when we talk about the changing landscape, it's not just in terms of the format. It's about changing perceptions. It's about changing perspectives. It's about changing the substance and the content in ways that are now relevant. So if Morung Express cannot keep up with the changing time, then we become irrelevant as a media organization. Because technology will keep on evolving. But allow me to say this. Just imagine in the Naga context, if all the newspapers were to shut down. Just imagine if all the papers had to close. And the only form of information was coming through the YouTube channels, the news outlet. Then just imagine what would become of our society. And I want you to hold that thought. For me, I think it would be incomplete. What do you think? For me, I think it would be incomplete. So there has to be a synergy within the media organizations across all spectrums, across all different platforms, the question of accountability, the question of transparency, the question of fairness. One of the aspects I think where ethics is really being challenged is that people want instant news. We now live in a world where everything is instant. You have instant noodles, you have instant coffee, and we also want instant news. Fast news. And in the process of doing that, whether the news will be authentic, whether it is verified, whether it has followed ethics and norms, I think is something for us to think about. So we live in a world of convenience now. We live in a world of instant. Everything is instant. And this is something I think the news world is grappling with. And perhaps this is also one of the factors that is contributing to the to the crisis of credibility. So these are some of the notes that I, was taking. I mean, newspapers actually in our context. I mean, Our Million was in 1932. So we have actually a very long history, a rich history in that sense. But again, the question is, how do we reimagine newspapers? How do we reimagine news? What is news in our context? And if, as Moa was talking about opinions, the need to differentiate between opinions, and if opinions is now becoming more important than the fact, that means policies will also be driven by opinions. The opinions of the powerful, the opinions of the individual, the opinions of a particular class, if I may put it that way. And if we allow opinions to be the driver of the public discourse, then I think truth would be the biggest casualty. And so what we have again here is we're all in transition. We have come to a place where feelings are more important than the truth. Because feelings are what creates opinion. And the gap between feelings and truth is going further and further apart. It is the responsibility of news agencies, journalists, to actually bridge that gap between feelings and truth, so that the news that they write, the news that they report, is as close as possible to the truth. Because it's only on the basis of that we can move together. But yet again, there's a dilemma of truth, and I think some of our speakers have raised that. And so some would question, okay, we talk about freedom of speech, right? But some would argue the freedom of speech actually is tested when there's freedom after speech. The freedom after speech is what will qualify the quality of the freedom of speech. And so there is that dilemma of truth that all journalists, all news agencies and organizations face. And the need for us to be as far as possible based on facts and evidence. And so in this crisis of credibility, from my point of view, the question of building trust becomes fundamental. This is not confined just to print media. It's not confined only to the digital outlets, so to speak, and the various channels, whichever platform they may be using. But I think it goes back to what Abokali was talking about, trust. As custodians of information, as custodians that are contributing to the public discourse, there is a need for trust. And we now live in a society that's very polarized, not just polarized, but we also live in a society that is very suspicious. And therefore the question of trust becomes so fundamental. And it is the responsibility of all of us here and all those behind there, and all of us here. How do we build that trust? Because trust building is not a one-way traffic, it's a two-way traffic. It's a trust between the readers and the viewers and the institutions. And many of you here are from institutions. You're taking mass comm. I think it needs to start from there. There are many faculty members here. The question of how do we restore trust and credibility in our public institutions, that also includes the media, so to speak. So these are some, some thoughts, some points that I have noted down, And I want to thank all of you. Especially the media. I want to, Abokali had requested not to take the, not to record, especially during the Q&A, because we have been receiving feedbacks that, when there are cameras, people don't feel so free and safe to share their opinions. And really from us, Morung, the whole purpose of Morung Dialogue, the whole purpose of Morung Lectures is to create safe space for this to be a place of truth-telling, not by way of judging or not by way of, throwing allegations and accusations, but by way of creating a safe space for us to speak the truth, to share the truth. And there will not just be one truth, there will be many truths, many different perspectives, but in respect, with mutual understanding. So that through these dialogue processes, somewhere in the future, and over the years, I think Morung has organized maybe 20, 21 lectures. Next week, we will be in Faisal Ali College in Mokchong. So if you happen to be in Mokchong, please join us at the Faisal Ali College on the 20th of September. The purpose of these dialogues is to create critical consciousness, is to create a Naga consciousness, a Naga consciousness that is open, emancipated, a consciousness that is not based on victimhood, a consciousness that is also, while respecting the past, is based on future thinking, and a consciousness where we are all co-creators of our present and our future. So I want to thank you so much for your patience and for being with us, and especially here, to Abokali, Esther, Moa, and Lungleng, for sharing their thoughts, for enriching us, for enabling us perhaps to think a little more deeper and perhaps a little more differently.